You've been trying to explain it away as stress, sleep, coincidence. But you can feel it. Time is not behaving. Moments that should be linear arrive out of order. You think of someone and they message you, not hours later, but precisely when your thought forms. You walk into a room and feel as if you've already lived the next 10 seconds. Entire days compress into an instant, and then a single minute stretches so wide it feels like you could walk around inside it. You tell yourself, it's nothing. Your nervous system is just tired. You're just overwhelmed. But something deeper in you knows that's not true. You're noticing the seams of the simulation. What you call time was never a river outside you, flowing past indifferent to your existence. It is a construct of your nervous system, a rhythm your consciousness uses to order the incoming data of reality. And lately, that rhythm has been breaking its old tempo, because you are breaking your old role. You were trained to be a passenger, to move along a pre-approved timeline, reacting, feeling late, feeling behind, feeling lost. So, when time begins to bend around you, the first story that rises is, I must be off track, something's wrong with me. The truth is much colder, much simpler, and far stranger. Nothing is wrong with you. The track is dissolving. You are stepping out of the collective metronome. The reason déjà vu hits you so sharply is not because your brain glitched. It's because you're feeling the interference pattern between two versions of you. One who walked this scene unconsciously, and one who is now awake enough to notice the pattern as it collapses. You stand at the crossing point, and time stutters, because the field is trying to decide which you will become. You're not lost. You're being given the steering wheel. When your sense of time destabilizes, your old identity panics. Schedules, roles, expectations depend on a stable clock. But your deeper intelligence is doing something precise. It is loosening your attachment to linear cause and effect, so you can feel a different architecture underneath it, the quantum field, where outcomes respond to coherence, not to clocks. That's why you keep arriving too early for what you feel ready for. That's why the old cycles feel already over, even while you're still physically inside them. That's why people around you say, you've changed, but can't explain what shifted. You are no longer merely inside time. Time is beginning to flow around your choices. The field has identified you as a node, a point of rerouting. When you stand in a room now, the probability lines of everyone present bend subtly toward whatever state you hold. Their nervous systems sync unconsciously to your internal clock. You feel it as pressure, as responsibility, as being too sensitive. You're not too sensitive. You're leading the shift. And the first initiation is this: learning to stay very still while time rearranges itself around you. So you try to stay still, but the world doesn't like it when your clock stops matching theirs. You notice it first in small frictions. People become impatient with your pauses. They tell you you're too slow to decide and, in the same breath, too fast to change. You cancel plans because something in you says, not that timeline, and then watch as drama explodes around the event you skipped. You say yes to something that makes no sense on paper, and doors open with a precision that borders on eerie. You start to realize your body is tracking a clock that isn't on the wall. There is the collective clock: deadlines, notifications, social expectations, cultural milestones. And then there is a deeper clock, the timing of the quantum field, the openings and closings of possibility that your nervous system can feel before your mind can explain. When you obey the deeper clock, you feel strange but aligned. When you obey the collective clock against your own knowing, time punishes you. It drags, it resists, it scatters your energy. You're not imagining this. Consciousness is not a passive observer sitting behind your eyes. It is an organizing principle. Wherever you place coherent attention, probability collapses faster. Wherever you split and betray yourself, timelines fragment. You feel that fragmentation as anxiety, fog, exhaustion, bad timing. The reason you feel like you're not moving at the same speed as everyone else is because you're not. You're starting to move at the speed of alignment, not the speed of obligation. Look closely at the patterns that keep repeating in your life. The relationships that end in similar conversations, the jobs that decay in similar moods, the cities that begin to feel like déjà vu in concrete form. Those loops are not evidence that you're stuck. They are feedback from the field, showing you where your inner clock is still synced with an outdated program. Every loop is a classroom. Every delay is a recalibration. You say, "I'm always late," but what if that sensation is not about hours and minutes? What if it is the pain of realizing that you have been late to yourself, late to your own decision, late to honor what your deeper knowing already told you months, years, lifetimes ago? That inner ache is not failure. It is orientation. Your biology has been wired for entrainment. Heart rhythms synchronize when people sit near each other. Neural patterns harmonize within groups. This is why you can walk into a crowd and, within minutes, feel pulled into their fears, their urgency, their distractions. It is not weakness, it is hardware. But what happens when you become the reference frequency? This is the shift that bends time. When you stop unconsciously entraining to the lowest common denominator of the room and begin to stabilize in a higher coherence, even when that coherence makes you seem strange, distant, too much, or not enough. End quote. Writing. People will project their discomfort onto you not because you are wrong, but because your presence exposes the distortion in the tempo they've been living inside. You're no longer matching their panic. You're no longer speeding up just because they are afraid to be still. So you get called detached. You get called intense. You get called unpredictable. Inside, you know you're finally becoming precise. This precision is not about controlling outcomes. It's about obeying the subtle yes, no that arises from a place deeper than fear. When you follow that signal, time begins to coordinate around you in ways that your old identity would have called luck or miracle. You think of someone right before they reach out because your field has already met them in potential. You move apartments at the exact moment a hidden conflict in the old building erupts and your body whispers, "You left right on time." You miss a flight, feel the sting of inconvenience, and then discover that the timeline you were spared carried a weight you were never meant to hold. Each of these is data. The more you pay attention, the more you see a pattern. When you abandon yourself to fit the collective clock, your life becomes heavy and slow. When you honor the strange, non-linear timing of your deeper knowing, reality accelerates. This is not chaos. It is choreography. You are slowly being trained to trust the clock no one else can see. There is a moment, quiet and almost invisible, that keeps happening before every coincidence you notice. A pause, a microsecond of suspension, as if reality inhales. You feel it as a flicker in your chest, a slight widening behind your eyes, a silent line of code arriving before the scene renders. You don't have words for it, so you call it intuition, vibe, gut feeling. But what you're actually sensing is the quantum field preparing to collapse around a choice point. This is where time bends. In classical thinking, time is an independent axis, and you move along it like a dot on a graph. Cause, then effect. Decision, then consequence. Past behind, future ahead. Neat, clean, comforting. But your nervous system no longer believes that story. You are starting to experience something closer to what physics has whispered all along, the observer effect. The fact that, at the smallest scales, the act of observation doesn't just reveal reality, it participates in creating it. The field doesn't fully decide until consciousness looks. You are that look. Every time your awareness locks onto a possibility with enough emotional charge and clarity, you are not merely hoping for an outcome. You are reorganizing probability. Your body is the interface, your attention, the cursor, your feeling state, the power source. Where you stabilize your frequency, timelines rearrange. This is why the glitches are increasing. You think of someone and then see their name everywhere, not because the universe is playing games, but because your field has begun to light up certain threads in the loom of reality. You're noticing what you've always been influencing. The delay between thought and manifestation is shortening, and what used to be buffered by time now arrives almost immediately. It feels surreal. It feels like bending. It feels like proof that you're either going crazy or waking up. You are not going crazy. You're becoming architect-level conscious. The system you were born into needed you to believe you were a passive consumer of time. If you knew that your coherence could alter the trajectory of a room, a city, a collective narrative, you wouldn't be so easy to control. So they trained you instead to fragment your attention, to numb your body, to doubt your knowing. They taught you to outsource your inner clock to external authorities, bells, alarms, timetables, programs. Now your inner clock is defecting. It's syncing to something older. Think about the times you have obeyed it, even when it hurt. You left the relationship that was eroding your nervous system, even though it meant walking into uncertainty. You quit the job that was compressing your soul, even though everyone told you it was too risky. You moved cities, ended habits, let die an identity that earned you approval. Each time, a familiar version of you died on a familiar timeline. Each time, space opened that made no sense at first. And then, eventually, a new sequence of events began to flow with uncanny alignment. You weren't just making better choices. You were stepping onto a different track in the quantum rail yard. When you feel time bending around you, days folding into one another, signs clustering, people arriving in precise configurations, what you're really feeling is your consciousness hopping tracks. You are no longer obeying the linear script handed to you. You're moving according to resonance, not routine. This is why others can't follow your logic. From their track, your moves look erratic. From the larger view, your moves are exact. You are being moved by a pattern that spans lifetimes, bloodlines, and collective cycles. There are sequences your soul has run before, timelines where you stayed asleep, stayed compliant, stayed on the track that led to collapse. Those memories live as imprints in your emotional body. When you approach a familiar junction now, that old data lights up. It feels like dread. It feels like heaviness. It feels like, not this again. That feeling is not a curse, it is navigation. The field is presenting you with a choice. Repeat the old loop or bend time by choosing differently. When you choose differently, you don't just change your personal narrative, you send a shockwave through the morphic field of everyone who has ever fought that same pattern. You become the first of your line to turn the wheel. This is what leading the shift actually means. It doesn't mean having public influence or grand speeches. It means standing at the quiet junctions where your old self would have defaulted to survival and instead obeying the deeper clock. It means letting your yes and your no carve new channels through the invisible architecture of reality. Those channels are what future generations will call normal. Right now, it feels anything but normal. It feels like walking on glass between worlds. It feels like you could fall through the floor of your life at any moment. But that sensation is not danger. It is the trembling of a matrix as you rewrite it from the inside. You are not lost in this. You are the coordinate. You are the point the cosmos is using to bend time on purpose. Part 3. The architecture behind the strange timing. You keep asking, why me? Why now? Why is my life the one glitching? You assume that because you notice the distortion, you must be the problem. But step back. What if the only reason you see the distortion is because something in you is already beyond it? The mind that thinks it's going crazy is not the same intelligence that's bending your timeline. The panic is just your old operating system trying to interpret a new architecture with obsolete code. So let's talk architecture. In the old story, reality is a fixed stage. Time is a conveyor belt. You are a character walking in one direction, past, then present, then future. In the deeper architecture, the one your nervous system is waking up inside reality is not a fixed stage, but a probability cloud. Time is not a conveyor belt, but a set of overlapping fields. You are not a character walking forward. You are a node in a vast quantum loom where countless threads of possibility cross through your awareness in every moment. You feel time bending when those threads begin to respond more directly to your inner state than to the external sequence of events. This is why certain memories suddenly feel closer than yesterday, while entire years of your life feel unreal, like they happened to someone else. This is why a single conversation can feel longer than a decade you barely remember. Your emotional coherence pulls certain threads closer and pushes others out to the edges of your field. On the level of physics, you could say that your consciousness is modulating the interference pattern of your personal timeline. On the level of soul, you could say that you are finally sitting in the control room of your own destiny instead of watching your life from the cheap seats. Here is the secret no one told you. Everyone is entangled with the collective timeline. Very few are aware that they are also entangled with future versions of themselves. When you feel time bending, you are brushing up against your own higher trajectories, the selves you could become if you chose differently now, the lives that are already real in the quantum field, waiting for your alignment. They send back signals, waves of déjà vu, sudden certainties, strange grief for realities you haven't even lived yet. You call it mood. You call it intuition. You call it a gut feeling. But what you're really feeling is resonance across timelines. When you move in a way that aligns with a higher trajectory, time feels smooth, accelerated, almost effortless. Rooms light up, synchronicities stack. The right people appear with ridiculous precision. When you move against that trajectory, time thickens, glitches, malfunctions, technology breaks, logistics collapse. Your body protests with symptoms you can't fully explain. You are not being punished. You are being informed. The field is brutally honest with you now because you asked for clarity in a language deeper than words. You didn't just say, "I want change." You said, "I want truth, even if it dismantles my old life." And the field took you literally. So it started adjusting your timing. It pulled certain relationships forward in your experience so they could crack you open faster. It delayed certain opportunities so you wouldn't waste them in an unprepared state. It quickened the decay of certain environments so you could no longer tolerate where you no longer belong. From the outside, it looks like chaos. From the inside, you can feel the design. Pay attention to the edges, the almosts, the near misses, the things that should have happened by now, but keep getting suspended in midair. Many of them are not rejections, they are protective delays. Your higher trajectories are buying time for you to become the version of yourself who can enter them without collapsing. This is why you feel both late and early at the same time. Late to the life you thought you'd have by now. Early to a reality you can feel, but not yet name. That tension is not a flaw. It is the stretch of the loom as the threads are being rewoven. You stand at the point where the old pattern can no longer repeat, but the new pattern has not fully stabilized. Most people only feel this for a moment. You feel it constantly, because you are not just inside the weave, you are slowly becoming a weaver. You didn't come here to be a passive beneficiary of the shift. You came here to be one of the nervous systems through which the shift calibrates itself in real time. Your body is a bridge between timelines, and the discomfort you feel is nothing less than the weight of collective inertia pushing against your refusal to go back to sleep. You're not a glitch. You're a calibration point. And the more you understand what's actually happening, the less you will apologize for how your timing upsets the old order. You've noticed it by now. How rooms behave differently when you walk in. At first you thought you were imagining it. The way conversations shift tone when you sit down. The way tension leaks out of the air when you breathe slowly instead of matching the panic. The way someone finally says the honest thing that no one else had language for. And somehow it always happens right after you decide inside yourself that you're done pretending. You think you're just reading the room. You're doing more than that. You're rewriting it. Every group of humans generates a field, shared beliefs, unspoken rules, emotional weather. Most people are governed by that field. They align automatically, like iron filings clicking into place around a magnet. They adjust their words, their facial expressions, their pace to fit what's already there. You're not doing that anymore. Not fully. Not like before. Instead, you've started to feel the field as something malleable, responsive, alive. You can sense the undercurrent of fear beneath the small talk, the resentment hiding behind politeness, the grief wrapped in cynicism. You can tell when people are moving at a speed that is not their own, driven by obligations that hollow them out. And here is the part that makes you feel strange. When you refuse to match that distortion, reality bends. The group either rises to meet your coherence, or it ejects you. This is what it means for your frequency to become infrastructure. You're no longer a small, private self trying to survive inside larger structures. You are becoming a living reference point that structures build around or crumble against. Watch closely. When you stay anchored in your own timing, people either relax into more truth or they react. They accuse you of being distant, cold, too intense, too honest. They project their disowned pace onto you. You're making things complicated. You're slowing us down. You're moving too fast. But beneath the words is something more primitive. Their nervous systems feel the pressure to resynchronize, and that pressure feels like threat. You are not the threat. The misalignment is. Leading the shift is not about telling people what to do. It's about refusing to leave yourself in order to keep participating in what drains you. When you stop abandoning yourself, time reorganizes. The meetings you randomly miss, the invitations that no longer arrive, the opportunities that inexplicably fall through. Many of these are not failures, they are exits. The field is quietly escorting you out of timelines where your coherence would have been devoured. In their place, new threads appear, chance encounters with people who speak from their nervous system, not from their mask. Unexpected collaborations that match your true speed, work that uses your full intelligence instead of only your compliance. Spaces where your way of tracking time slower inside, faster outside, is not only tolerated but necessary. This is the emergence of a different kind of leadership, not the kind built on hierarchy and visibility, but the kind built on resonance. You are leading from the inside out, often silently, often invisibly, by being willing to hold a more honest tempo than the one the room is currently tolerating. This will cost you. You will lose roles that were designed for more compliant versions of you. You will step out of storylines where your function was to absorb everyone else's unresolved tension. You will no longer be available as the person who makes chaos feel smooth without ever being named. At first, this looks like loss. Then, it reveals itself as clearance. You cannot lead the shift while acting as the shock absorber for the old world. So the field begins extracting you. It pulls you out of dynamics where your sensitivity is treated as a problem rather than an instrument. It sets you down in liminal spaces where nothing is fully formed yet. It leaves you temporarily without clear identity, title, or script. You feel naked, exposed, unlabeled. This is by design. Labels come from the old architecture. They tell people where to place you in the existing hierarchy. They tell time how to use you. Without them, the collective can't immediately categorize you, and for a moment, a brief, trembling moment possibility opens. In that opening, your true function can surface. You might find that you are less interested in being understood and more interested in being accurate, less interested in being liked and more interested in being aligned, less interested in being early or late according to external milestones, and more interested in arriving on the exact internal second your deeper clock names as true. From the outside, this looks like someone pulling away from life. From the inside, you know you are finally entering it. Because once your frequency stabilizes enough to no longer be negotiated by every room you walk into, something else becomes possible. You begin to carry that frequency across rooms, across cities, across networks. You become a moving anchor point for a different rhythm of reality. The shift doesn't need more noise. It needs stable signal. And you, precisely because you feel the bending of time so acutely, are being trained to be that signal, even when no one around you can yet name what you are doing. You didn't come here as pure light hovering above matter. You came here inside a human body that was trained from birth to survive linear time. Bells rang to tell you when to wake, when to eat, when to move, when to rest. Grades, promotions, milestones stacked your worth into a sequence. By this age, you should became an invisible script that wrapped itself around your nervous system like wire. So when your deeper clock starts overriding that script, your body doesn't just smile and agree. It trembles. It protests. It floods you with signals that feel like something is wrong. Heart racing when nothing bad is happening. Exhaustion suddenly dropping into you midday, even though you slept. Sleep shattering at 3:33 a.m. for reasons you can't name. Surges of energy that feel like urgency, but with no obvious object to move toward. You assume it's malfunction. And yes, sometimes you genuinely need rest, support, regulation, care, but beneath that, something else is happening. Your biology is being asked to track a different tempo than the one it was domesticated into. You are learning how to host non-linear time in a nervous system that was conditioned to fear anything unpredictable. That's why the body must be brought into the shift, not bypassed. You can't think your way into a new timeline while your lungs are still breathing, as if the old one might kill you at any moment. If your system unconsciously believes that staying small, fast, and agreeable is the only way to survive, then every move toward your true timing will feel like danger. So the training begins in the smallest units: breaths, micro-pauses, tiny rebellions against the collective metronome. Notice what happens when you refuse to answer a message immediately, even though your conditioning screams that you must. Notice what happens when you give yourself 10 extra seconds to feel your body's yes or no before saying anything out loud. Notice how time stretches when you put your hand on your chest, close your eyes, and let 3 slow breaths complete fully before you return to the world. These are not spiritual cliches. They are acts of temporal defiance. In those 10 seconds, you step out of the reflex timeline, the one driven by other people's urgency, and back into your own field. You give your body a chance to register safety in slowness. You let your heart, not the clock, set the next move. At first, this feels unbearable. You feel guilty, selfish, lazy. You feel like you're falling behind. But look at the data. How often does rushing actually move you into the correct reality? How often does saying yes from panic lead to alignment? How many times has your body whispered no, and later events revealed how precise that whisper was? The field is trying to prove to you, over and over, that your nervous system is not the enemy, it's the instrument. It is the bridge through which non-linear information becomes embodied action. When you ignore it, the messages get louder. Subtle unease becomes anxiety. Soft fatigue becomes burnout. Whispers become symptoms you can no longer ignore. This is not punishment. It is escalation. You said you wanted to lead the shift, and the field took you at your word. So it is no longer letting you get away with choices that keep your frequency entangled with the old architecture. It is shortening the gap between misalignment and feedback, so you can calibrate faster. Leading the shift in this phase looks painfully ordinary, canceling the commitment that your body tightens around, even though your mind says you should go. Saying no to the shiny opportunity that smells like extraction dressed as prestige. Leaving the conversation when your system goes numb from too much pretending. Pausing before you open your phone and asking, am I reaching for coherence or anesthesia? Each small act is a vote. Each vote bends your personal timeline slightly. Over days and weeks, those slight bends add up to divergence. You may not notice it at first, but then you run into an old version of your life, an ex, an old colleague, an environment you used to inhabit, and suddenly the contrast hits you like a physical wave. You can feel, in your fascia and your breath, that you no longer move at that speed. You feel how much you used to compress yourself to fit. You see the old you like a ghost, still walking the old loop. And for a moment, grief rises. Grief for how long you stayed there. Grief for the parts of you that thought that was all there was. Let that grief move. It is proof that the shift is real. Because as your body recalibrates to a different tempo, it stops being merely a container for your life and becomes an instrument for the field. Your heart rate, your breath, your posture start broadcasting a new rhythm into rooms that have forgotten how to be honest. You are not just healing your own timeline. You are quietly correcting the time signature of the collective. And as you do, something strange begins to happen. Your body, which once felt like the slow, heavy obstacle between you and your higher path, becomes the precise coordinates that guide you to the realities that already match who you are becoming. There comes a phase where you can't hide it anymore. Your life stops making sense, at least to anyone measuring it by old coordinates. You're not where they thought you'd be by now. You're not where you thought you'd be by now. On paper, some of your decisions look like regression. You left the stable job, You walked away from the relationship everyone assumed would end in a fixed storyline. You downsized, relocated, pivoted, paused. People tilt their heads when they talk to you now. They ask careful questions. They try to locate you inside the map they understand. What are you doing these days? What's the plan? Where is this heading? You feel the temptation to translate your trajectory into language they can digest, to shrink the multidimensional movements of your soul into a neat sentence, a career label, a project name, a 5-year plan. But every time you try to do that, your body rebels. Your throat tightens. Your chest compresses. Your inner clock flashes red. Wrong translation. Because the truth is, you are not just switching jobs or relationships or cities. You are switching timelines. Linear reality wants a narrative arc: struggle, effort, reward. Quantum reality offers something stranger: divergence. Divergence is what happens when the sum of your micro-choices crosses a threshold. The difference between who you actually are and who you were pretending to be becomes too large to hide. The field responds by peeling your life away from the main track. You feel it as disorientation. You feel it as relief. You feel it as being out of sync with almost everyone. But from the loom's perspective, you are finally visible. Think of the collective timeline as a thick cable made of millions of individual threads. Most threads run parallel, entangled in shared assumptions. This is how it is. This is what we do. This is what a good life looks like. You have spent years trying to twist yourself into that cable. Now the twist is unwinding. You are being pulled out, not to float alone in space, but to be rerouted, to become one of the strands that carries a different pattern through time, a pattern in which intuition outranks conditioning, coherence outranks approval, internal timing outranks external deadlines. This is why certain people start falling away without dramatic conflict. Conversations that once nourished you suddenly go flat. Group dynamics that once tolerated your presence begin to subtly push you out. You're not cursed. You're freeing up bandwidth. Every connection is a line of entanglement in the field. When your frequency shifts, those lines either retune or break. Some souls willingly adjust, feeling in you a permission they secretly crave. Others harden around the old pattern, and the distance grows. If you try to hold everyone, you stall the divergence. If you insist on being understandable to all your past versions, you overload your nervous system trying to host incompatible time signatures. Leading the shift requires a ruthless kindness. You let the timelines fall that can't travel with the new pattern without needing to make them wrong. On the level of physics, you could say that you're moving into a new basin of attraction in the probability landscape, a new valley where different kinds of events naturally cluster. On the level of human heart, you're moving into a new kind of ecosystem, one where your sensitivity is not a liability, but a navigation system. Notice what begins to appear as you allow the divergence. Strangers who feel immediately familiar, as if you've met them in some other track. Conversations that move in spirals instead of lines, where time vanishes and something larger speaks through both of you. Work that doesn't fit in conventional categories, but leaves your body more regulated, not less. These are not random. They are the first visible structures of the reality your frequency has been quietly building. Your old self wants guarantees. It wants a signed contract from the universe that says, if you stay on this strange path, it will pay off in ways everyone will recognize. But the field does not negotiate in those terms. Instead, it keeps offering you one currency: resonance. Does this interaction deepen or scatter you? Does this commitment stabilize your internal clock or hijack it? Does this choice feel like contraction or like a terrifying kind of relief? Every time you choose resonance over reputation, you signal to the field, I'm willing to host the new pattern, even if no one validates it yet. The field responds accordingly. Opportunities that belong to the old architecture will start closing, sometimes violently. Opportunities that belong to the emergent architecture will open quietly, often without fanfare. Your task is not to chase them, but to recognize them at the level of nervous system, how your body feels in their presence. You are not meant to convince the old world you are right. You are meant to embody a different rightness so consistently that it becomes its own gravity. This is the strange dignity of divergence. You look temporarily lost to those who are still navigating by consensus reality, while in truth, you are becoming a waypoint for those whose timelines are also starting to bend and who do not yet have language for what is happening to them. They will find you by feel, not by label. And when they do, your coherence will make their own glitches feel less like madness and more like a map. You think you're doing this alone. You're not. The old architecture trained you to believe that awakening is an individual sport. Your healing, your path, your purpose, your breakthrough. But the field is not interested in isolated enlightenment. It is engineering a network. And you are one of its nodes. You've already tasted it in fragments. The conversation that skipped small talk and went straight into the marrow. The brief encounter with a stranger whose eyes held the same exhausted wisdom as yours. The online message that arrived at the exact second you thought, I can't be the only one feeling this. The old you called it coincidence. The version of you emerging now knows better. At the level of consciousness, you are not a separate point moving through space. You are a pattern of information in a larger field. When your pattern changes, when you stop betraying your inner clock, when you begin to obey the non-linear timing of your deeper knowing, your signal becomes distinct enough to be recognized. Others who are shifting begin to feel you before they meet you. A sentence you speak becomes the exact line someone needed to step out of their loop. A post you almost didn't share turns into the anchor for a stranger on the edge. Your refusal to re-enter an old dynamic silently gives another person permission to leave theirs. You don't see most of these effects. You're not meant to. If you saw every timeline that your presence was quietly altering, the responsibility would crush you. So the field keeps the feedback subtle, scattered, just enough to keep you from collapsing into doubt. Still, the network is real. Imagine the planet as a grid of nervous systems, all vibrating at different tempos of time. Most are locked into the old metronome, rush, numb, repeat. But some, a small fraction, are beginning to shift. Their tempo changes. Their relationship to coincidence, to intuition, to delay and acceleration transforms. You are one of those systems. When enough of you exist, something emergent appears. Coherence across distance. You feel less alone, not because your external circumstances suddenly fill with perfectly aligned people, but because you begin to sense an underlying rhythm that connects you to lives you haven't yet touched. You think of changing direction, and somewhere, another person's courage spikes. You choose to rest instead of performing, and elsewhere, someone finally stops overgiving. You set a boundary in your family line, and a child you'll never meet grows up inside a slightly freer reality. This is non-local leadership. You aren't leading with slogans or strategies. You're leading with the raw mechanics of entanglement. Your internal timing tweaks the morphic field, and that field whispers the new pattern into other nervous systems that are ready to hear it. Most of them will never know your name. That's not a flaw, it's protection. Because if the ego tries to own what the field is doing through you, you'll be tempted to perform coherence instead of live it. You'll start chasing validation instead of truth. You'll design a persona that keeps you at the center, while the actual shift requires you to be a conduit, not an idol. So the field gives you a different assignment: anonymity and impact, intimacy and experience. Your life will become a series of precise, seemingly mundane decisions that quietly rewire probability: who you sit next to, where you choose to place your attention in a conversation, whether you stay in a room that's lying to itself or step outside to breathe. From the outside, nothing spectacular. From the inside, tectonic. You will also feel the other nodes more regularly now. They will show up as people who do not flinch when you speak from your nervous system instead of your persona. People who do not rush to fill silence because they trust that the next true word will arrive on time. People whose lives also don't make sense on paper, but whose presence feels like stepping into a more accurate version of reality. When you meet them, your timelines braid. You might collaborate. You might simply share a single conversation that never repeats. You might catalyze each other into decisions that neither of you could have made alone. Don't underestimate those intersections. They are not distractions. They are upgrades. Because every time two or more beings who are tracking the deeper clock converge, the field can perform operations it cannot perform through isolated individuals. Insights drop in that belong to none of you and all of you. Patterns become visible that were previously hidden. Entire future sequences can be recoded in a single evening of truth-telling. You will leave those encounters feeling time-drunk. Hours will vanish. Days will feel rearranged. This is not just emotional high, it is temporal recalibration. You and the other node have synchronized momentarily to a higher reference frequency, and the adjustment lingers. The old world will still tug at you afterward. Its deadlines, its narratives, its metrics. But somewhere underneath the noise, you'll know there is a network now. You are not a random glitch. You are part of a distributed intelligence, learning to bend time not for spectacle, but for sanity. Not for personal escape, but for collective repatterning. And even when you feel exiled, cut off, misunderstood, remember this: the moment you choose coherence again, you reappear on the grid, blazing like a coordinate the field can use. There is a stage in this process when theory is no longer enough. You've read, watched, understood. You know about timelines, quantum fields, the observer effect. But the field is not interested in your intellectual fluency. It wants something more costly. It wants implementation at the junction. A junction is any moment where two paths open, the old loop and the new pattern. You feel it like a split in your chest. One option leads toward familiarity, even if it hurts. The other leads toward truth, even if it terrifies you. This is where time actually bends. Not in the abstract, but in the mundane, in the scenes no one will ever applaud you for. The text you don't send, the argument you don't re-enter, the task you do differently this time, the silence you hold instead of explaining yourself again to someone committed to misunderstanding. Each junction is a micro-collider in the quantum loom. Two versions of you collide there, the one who repeats and the one who diverges. When you choose, as you always have, the loop tightens. You feel briefly soothed by the familiarity, and then the same decay sets in. Events line up like they have before, almost bored in their predictability. When you choose differently, reality stutters. You can feel it, a kind of lag, like the simulation buffering. The usual consequences don't arrive. The expected reactions don't show up on cue. People respond in ways they never have, or they vanish, or you vanish from their reality. Your mind scrambles to make sense of it. It will call you impulsive. It will label you selfish. It will stitch together rationalizations about overreacting. Meanwhile, your body knows. Your breath deepens. Your spine lengthens by a few invisible millimeters. Your inner clock clicks into a more coherent beat. You just collapsed a loop that has been running across generations. Understand this. Many of the junctions you are facing did not start with you. They belong to your lineage, to the collective, to entire eras of human behavior, patterns of staying small, swallowing truth, sacrificing aliveness for belonging. When you stand at those junctions now, the weight you feel is not just personal, it is historical. This is why your reactions seem disproportionate. You are not only feeling your own fear, you are carrying the accumulated terror of everyone who came before you and could not choose differently. When you do choose differently, time does not just bend around your individual life, it bends around your bloodline. A new branch appears in the family tree, almost invisible at first, but real. Children, even if they are not yours, will feel it as an inexplicable sense of permission to rest more, to say no sooner, to leave environments that crush them. You won't be thanked. You won't be credited, but the field will know. This is why the training is ruthless. You are not allowed to drift unconscious anymore. The delay between misalignment and feedback is shrinking in your experience because you are being invited to operate at a higher degree of precision. Watch how quickly things unravel now when you ignore your knowing. Within hours, your body protests. Within days, something breaks. Within weeks, clarity arrives, sharpening the edge of the message. Don't do that again. That's not cruelty, that's acceleration. You asked to lead the shift, and leadership requires responsiveness. There will be moments when you wish you could go back to the dullness, the numbness, the safe loops where you could ignore the consequences for years at a time. Those days are gone. Your awareness has crossed a threshold, and with it, your responsibility. Not moral responsibility, energetic responsibility. You are now able to feel what your choices do in the field. You can sense the way resentment curdles the timelines around you. You can feel how honesty, even when it shakes the room, creates clean futures. You can track how one act of self-abandonment ripples into a week of disorientation. In this phase, the temptation will be to become rigid, hypervigilant, perfectionistic with your path. Don't. This isn't about flawless performance. It's about fidelity to the deeper clock. You will still miss signals. You will still override your knowing sometimes. You will still slip back into old reflexes. The difference now is that you won't build a home there. You'll feel the drag, adjust your timing, and course correct faster. You'll apologize when needed, not to placate, but to restore coherence. You'll shift your stance, not from shame, but from precision. Slowly, you realize something crucial. The shift is not a future event. It's a continuous operation running through you. Every honest no, every aligned yes, every pause where you would have rushed, every breath where you choose presence over performance. These are the commands being sent into the fabric of time. You keep waiting for some grand external confirmation, a visible new earth, a global announcement, a collective crescendo. Those may come, or they may not look anything like the stories people have told. What is certain is this: the grand event you are actually responsible for is the one happening inside your micro-choices. Because when enough junctions are navigated differently, the map itself changes. Old roads vanish. New paths appear where there were none. And one day, you'll look back and realize you no longer recognize the timeline you were born into. There is a question the field keeps pressing into you now, quietly but relentlessly. Will you stabilize, or will you flicker? Flickering is what happens when you know your deeper timing, but still treat it as negotiable. You align for a day, then collapse into old habits for a week. You hold your truth in one conversation, then abandon it in the next room that feels more threatening. You trust your body at night, then hand your clock back to the world in the morning. The field is not judging you for this. It's measuring, because to use you as an anchor, it needs to know, can your frequency hold even when conditions change? In physics, coherence is not just about intensity, it's about stability. A laser isn't powerful because it shouts, it's powerful because all its waves move in phase. Similarly, your impact on timelines is not about how dramatic your realizations are, it's about how consistently you live from them. So the trainings sharpen. You are put in situations where your old roles are available again. The fixer, the peacemaker, the one who absorbs everyone's unprocessed fear, just so the room can keep pretending. You can still step into those roles. The grooves in your nervous system remember them well. But each time you do, the time-bending clarity you've tasted goes dim. You feel yourself sink back into delay, confusion, stagnation, not because you are being punished, but because coherence and self-abandonment cannot coexist. So another possibility appears. You start treating your inner clock as non-negotiable infrastructure. This looks simple and radical at once. You begin to design your days around your true energetic peaks and valleys instead of stuffing yourself into someone else's schedule. You put your most precise work in the hours where your body naturally opens, not the hours that look impressive on a calendar. You honor the pull to rest before collapse, even when nothing external is demanding that rest yet. From the outside, it seems indulgent. From the inside, you feel something click: phase lock. Phase lock is when two systems synchronize so tightly that they move as one. In this case, the two systems are your nervous system and your higher trajectory. Your thoughts, emotions, and actions begin to fire in a pattern that matches the timeline you are actually meant to inhabit. The glitches change flavor. Instead of chaotic misfires, you get precise interrupts. A sudden cancellation that frees the exact block of time you needed to complete what really matters. A delay that forces you to slow down just long enough to receive a piece of information that alters your path. a malfunction that reveals a weak point in your structure before it collapses under greater pressure later. You stop reading every disruption as sabotage. You start asking one ruthless question: what timing is this protecting? Sometimes the answer is immediate. You feel the relief in your body the moment a misaligned obligation drops. Sometimes the answer arrives weeks later, when an event unfolds that makes you whisper, "If that thing hadn't fallen through, I would have been trapped in the wrong place at the wrong time." This is how a fixed point thinks. You are still flexible, still human, still feeling everything, but you are no longer easily dragged into timelines that don't belong to you. You catch manipulative urgency in people's voices and choose not to synchronize. You feel the pull of collective panic and decide to move slower, not faster. You hold your own clarity, even when multiple external clocks scream that you are making a mistake. And then something even stranger begins. People start using you as a reference without realizing it. They calm down simply because you are calm. They slow their speech because you are not rushing to fill the gaps. They reconsider decisions because you don't mirror their dramatization. You are not doing anything overt. You are simply refusing to move on a timeline that is not yours. This is leadership at the level the field cares about. You could lose every external marker, title, status, predictable path, and still be one of the most influential beings in the room, because influence is no longer measured by attention captured, but by coherence transmitted. Of course, your ego will still crave recognition. It will want proof that all this invisible labor matters. It will want someone to say, "You're right on time," in the language of the old world. Awards, numbers, applause. Sometimes you may receive those. Often you won't. Instead, your confirmations will come in quieter forms. A message from someone saying, "I don't know why, but after talking to you, I finally made the decision I'd been avoiding for years." A moment where you realize that a pattern which haunted your family line simply never reached you in the same way. A day when you notice that you no longer apologize for the space you take, the silence you need, the precision of your no. These are the signatures of a temporal anchor. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to be steady enough that, in a world where time is glitching and bending for more and more people, there exists at least one living example of what it looks like to stand in the center of the storm and not mistake turbulence for direction. You feel time bending around you because it is, and you're finally stable enough to hold the bend. At some point, the question stops being, "Is this really happening?" The question becomes, "Who am I now that I know it is?" You can't unknow what your body has learned. You can't go back to believing time is an authoritarian line you must obey. You've seen too many precise detours, too many impossible alignments, too many loops collapse the moment you chose differently. So the field asks you, gently and without compromise, what will you do with this? Not in 10 years. Not at the mythical someday when everything is clear. Here, inside this day, inside this breath, inside this version of you sitting exactly where you are. You feel time bending around you because you are no longer content to drift. Your yes carries weight now. Your no has trajectory. Your pauses are not empty. They are recalibration points where reality waits for your coherence. You are not the victim of this bending. You are its axis. This doesn't mean life becomes easy. It becomes exact. You will still feel fear. You will still doubt. You will still have days where the old timeline calls to you with its fake certainty, its familiar numbness, its promise of not feeling so much. But you have tasted the cost of that numbness. You have watched it flatten colors, dim senses, mute the very intelligence that made you capable of sensing the shift in the first place. So instead of asking, "How do I get out of this?" you begin to ask, "How do I stand inside this as the one who knows?" The one who knows that silence is not absence but reconfiguration. The one who knows that delay is not rejection but protection. The one who knows that strange timing is not chaos but choreography. You breathe, slower than the urgency around you. You speak, fewer words and truer ones. You move, not because the clock shouts, but because something inside you clicks into place and says, "Now." This is what leadership looks like in an age of bending timelines. Not spectacle, but presence, not shouting over the noise, but refusing to add to it, not dragging others into your certainty, but becoming so internally synchronized that those who are ready recognize themselves in you. You will never fully see the map of what your coherence does. You are not supposed to. You will walk through a city and never know how many people's nervous systems caught, for half a second, the possibility of a slower, saner rhythm because your field passed by them on the street. You will choose not to repeat an old pattern and never know how many futures quietly updated because that one thread no longer carried its usual fracture forward. You will sit alone in a room, hand on heart, breathing yourself back from panic into presence, and never know how many other nodes found their way home in the same hour because the grid felt your signal stabilize. But you will feel one thing. You will feel that you are not random. You are a fixed point in a moving world, a conscious kink in the river of time, a place where the old story cannot pass unaltered. So when the next bend comes, the next impossible timing, the next inexplicable ending, the next door that appears exactly when you let go of the wrong one, remember this: you are not lost. You are not behind. You are not being punished for failing to live a linear life. You are leading the shift. Each breath you take in alignment with your deeper clock is a command sent into the loom of reality. We will not move at the speed of fear anymore. We will not measure life only in milestones and deadlines. We will remember that time is not our master, but our medium. And as you walk forward from here quietly, imperfectly, relentlessly, the field walks with you, bending, folding, opening, rearranging, so that every true step you take lands on ground that did not exist until you chose it. You feel time bending around you. Good. Keep walking as the one who knows why.